Welcome back to the Florida Band Podcast. You know why you're here. In part 2 of our interview with the esteemed Josh Boyd, we continue to unravel the experiences behind his remarkable career as a band director, sharing insights on his innovative approaches, unwavering passion, and the transformative impact he has had on countless students. Get ready for an inspiring and enlightening part 2 of our conversation with Josh that will leave you eager for more.
I teach students that are going to be world-class musicians, and people from my school have gone on to lead universities. We have folks that play in professional orchestras. We have folks that literally produce, play, or perform music all over the world from our community in Noonan, Georgia. But here's what I've discovered. Students, especially ones that may come from backgrounds that maybe they're going to be the first high school graduate, maybe they're going to be the first college graduate. No one there has been a musician, and in many cases, no one there has been an academic person before. In other words, it's hard to end up at a destination when you don't have a map. If you don't have a roadmap of what mastery is, it's hard to just figure it out. And so how I ended up with a pass-off system or a mastery system is I realized I need to create a way that makes it clear and defined for a student that knows nothing about music from the time they enter my program in 6th grade until the time that they leave, how to get to mastery. In a world of endless possibilities, how do I narrow that down so if they do A, B, C, and D, they will end up in the correct place? And that's what we sought to do, and I still do that to this day with my high school students. And so I would challenge you, everybody listening, to understand that a student cannot rise to a level, even if you define what greatness is, if you don't give them the path, they don't know how to get there. I can't tell you guys how many times I've heard young teachers go, well, hey, you need to go home and practice. Well, guys, practice what? You didn't tell them. Or you need to go play in tune. Well, did you ever tell them what in tune was? Or you need to play with the correct embouchure. Do you really want YouTube by itself to teach a kid how to play with a great embouchure? We have to give them the ability to have a clear path to get there, because asking a kid to go home and practice without telling them exactly not just what to practice, but how to practice and the step-by-step, the scaffolding steps is almost kind of pointless. And when you were talking about Smoky Road, I stumbled upon my very first version of the pass-off system because I knew I needed to change. And I was doing a presentation at GMEA, and lo and behold, this person walked in. I didn't know who he was yet, but his name was Dr. Dwight Satterwhite, and at the University of Georgia. And he hands me this booklet of pass-offs, and I didn't know who he was, so I threw it in a corner of the band room, didn't think much of it. It was almost 2 years later, and I'm cleaning out the band room, and I open up this random book, and I start to look through it, and I realize that inside of this book at the time, it was a step-by-step process that a kid could start in 6th grade and get all the way through 12th grade. And if they followed that plan, it guaranteed that they were going to be a reasonable, good musician. So I called him on the phone and said, hey, do you remember me? And he was like, yeah, you're that guy I met at that presentation. Did you finally read my book I gave you? And I was like, yeah, I did. And then I was kind of embarrassed. And he goes, well, let's get together. So we got together and met. And when we met, he played me a recording. And a lot of people don't know this. They know him as the director emeritus at the University of Georgia. But what they don't know is back in the 70s, he was a middle school band director. And he played me a recording of his middle school band just playing this music that was fantastic, like straight up Sousa marches and everything else. And I was like, what high school is that? He goes, no. That's my middle school band from the 70s. By the way, he was playing it on a like a vinyl. It was on his record player. And he goes, these kids were the smartest kids in the world. I was teaching a band and their parents were landing a man on the moon because he was the band director in Huntsville, Alabama over there. And then that's when I realized that middle school kids can do anything. And so today I use, I've tweaked it. My system's a little bit different than that one. But the concept that Dr. Satterwhite taught me, I still apply to this day, that we've got to give them a clear path. So Christian, I'm pausing a second because I'm not sure if I'm answering your question exactly, but philosophically, that's how I got there. And I would challenge everybody listening to have some version of a pass-off system. By the way, pass-offs work great, not when they're teacher-led, but when they're student-led. And if you have a pass-off system, what happens for me, I had sixth graders that would play in my top band by their second semester because if a kid is working by themselves through my pass off system and they reach movement three, which is the same level most of my eighth graders are on, why in the world would I leave them in sixth grade band? So they would start attending after school rehearsals, getting enrichment with the eighth grade band because I changed everything. I started doing everything by ability rather than just by the how long you've existed on the planet. And it's amazing. I had sixth graders, guys, sixth grade clarinet players. Everybody worries about crossing the break. My last year at Smoky Road, I had 32 clarinet players. Out of those 32 clarinet players, 26 of them had crossed the break before like December, and I never taught it in class because that was something I didn't get to till January, me personally, with those awful Grenadilla jump sounding things in the Essential Elements book. But anyways, by the time they got to the end of sixth grade, I had 12 clarinets that played all 12 major scales, 2 octaves by the end of sixth grade. And I just never told them it was hard. They didn't know it was hard. They just saw a pass off. It was a skill. They wanted the skill. There was a way to get to that skill. And so they worked ahead of me and they got there. And as seventh graders, they ended up playing in my top band because why hold them back if they're ready to go?
Were there any big milestones for how you adapted the pass off system to your situations?
Absolutely. And by the way, we went from a grade two band to a grade four band the first year I implemented it, and we never went back. That was the huge difference it made in my middle school program. I mean, never went back. And, through pandemic and everything else at the high school band, I use a different version, but we've maintained a grade six band, which in Georgia is the highest level. And we've never looked back because during the pandemic, my students still had their pass off system. So growing and developing as a musician never stopped for us while it just came to a screeching halt for most people. But, as far as getting it started in milestones, the very first year, it was tough. I remember the first year, and I don't know if this is what you're asking. Are you asking as far as just the difficulties and the milestones and getting it started, or?
No, I meant in like changes you've made or realizations you had on the way about implementing a pass off system. Okay, for example, there was one time you and I had a conversation where I had mentioned that students don't move on to the next level of pass offs until they complete the level before it, and you had said, "Oh, I really don't care what level they're working on as long as they're completing pass offs." Like, what led you to that, and has that changed, or things like that, like how you I guess the rules you create for your pass off system for your students. Like, what are some of the big ones that you rely on?
We want it to be student led. Like, we absolutely give students within a level to have the freedom to jump around and do whatever they want to do. And why should I tell them their order? Now, for those of you that have been teaching a long time, we know as teachers, they're going to naturally progress in the right order anyways. For example, a sixth grade kid is not going to go knock out a 2 octave F sharp major scale if they can't go back on step 0 and hold out a concert F for 12 seconds with a good tone and uninterrupted waves and sound or whatever. So like the kids will naturally, if you allow them to have student choice, they're naturally going to progress in the correct order anyways. But I discovered that when I give students autonomy to chart their own goals within the pass-off systems, to create their own way of accomplishing it. And I have some pass-offs in my system now that allow students to have choice. Now I teach high school kids, but like we have stuff in there like play a solo, you must play a chamber ensemble, but I give them the freedom. So as long as they bring your solo to me, let me look at it. You can't back that thing up. It needs to be a legit solo. But we have stuff in there that gives students opportunities to create and explore who they are within that. And in doing so, the kids acquire more mastery skills because they believe they're acquiring those mastery skills to help them create the music that they want to create. For example, I have some students that they love rap music. I have some that love country, classical. We took 40-something kids to go hear the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra last year. That was a completely separate story. But anyways, we have some students that love rap music. So there is a pass off in there that basically, while the rest of you directors out there are using rhythm sheets, my students create the rhythm sheets. They have to create the rhythm sheets. I say, write me 4 measures in 4/4 3/4 2/4 6/8 simple and compound. And then under that, you have to write the counts, and then bring that to me, which then I get to do a mini lesson with that student to make sure they're counting in the counting system appropriately. But then we pass that out to the class. In the class, we clap and count while everyone else is doing the fussle rhythms. Man, my students are creating their own rhythm sheets, which is fantastic. And then I've had students to go, hey, when I get done with this, can I take rap songs and can I write them out as rhythms? And as the students are counting, as long as the lyrics are okay, can I rap it while people are clapping and counting the rhythms? Yeah, absolutely you can. And so, for me, that's just one example of stuff that is student engagement. We also use music first technology, and within that is flat, which is what we use for music notation. But there's also a thing in there called sound trap. So our new wave that we're on exploring right now within our pass off system is students now have pass offs in the grade 3 or the mastery movements for level 3 and 4, where now they're starting to produce music and produce sounds. And they're also reflecting and recording podcasts that are reflecting on what they've heard. Because in high school, we're trying to create not just music producers and lifelong music players, but I want to teach them to critically evaluate music as well, so that they don't only enjoy it, but that they're able to use that information to help them critically reflect. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but experience just music at a higher level. Am I kind of going down, Christian? Is that making sense?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's cool. What are some of the other, I guess, what's the word? Unconventional pass-offs that you have going in your program right now?
So for me in high school, I've had kids make all-state band every single year that I've been in high school. And part of that is that we all know, and I don't know how it is in Florida, but in Georgia, most of the final score, if you make it past the final round, it comes down to sight reading. Can the kid sight read? And I just, everybody else's kids are just sight reading for the first time. But by the time my kid gets to movement 2, they have played out of 2 different method books. They've worked up 37 etudes. They've played all 12 major scales, and they've played 12 natural minor scales. They've sight read for extensively in sight reading factory in levels 1, 2, and part of sight reading factory level 3. And then they've created rhythms in basic, but also compound. And then they're exploring, meters such as 4/2, 3/2, and relating those to other meters. And for me too, I don't know if it's unconventional per se, but we extensively in the high school get them through etudes as fast as we can. And side note too, when we bring in clinicians and instructors to work with the kids and teach lessons, it unifies the entire program, because every clarinet player I have is going to be in Rubank Advanced Volume 1, I'm making this up now, page 5, number 3. So now when I bring folks in and they're teaching clinics and they're teaching studios, it's all unified, and that works out really, really good. Oh, and by the way, at my school, if you take private lessons from one of my approved instructors, they're allowed to sign off on your pass off. So if you're taking private lessons, you can go further faster, because now you have somebody who for an entire hour they're dedicated to you. And so the whole process between district and all-state, that's an everyday occurrence in my band room, whether they're trying out for all-state or not. Like, it's the same thing. All-state getting in is individual musicianship. For me, while a lot of other teachers are focused on ensemble, my job at Noonan High School is to teach them how to become great individual performers. The music we play is just a byproduct of their individual musicianship.
So do you ever have an issue with parents or students complaining that, they don't think it's fair that kids that can afford private lessons are getting more pass-off points, whereas they're not, because they can't afford it?
We have that. We had that happen initially. But some of that is how we allocate our resources. We solved that by two ways. The first thing that we do is when I got to the high school, we had a pretty large prop budget for the marching band. It was like $4,000 to $7,000. Now I know for some schools down, especially down in Florida or in the north side of Atlanta, that's not even the coverings that go on their props. They're running $20,000 to $30,000 prop budgets. But for me, philosophically, I wanted to make a change. So we still have some stuff in the show. Great irony is our marching band typically still finishes in the top three at every contest we go to without all as much stuff on the field. But I reallocated some of that money to paying from our band account, and our band boosters are amazing. And we pay for some instructors to come in and work with kids, and we target kids that we know can't afford it on their own. The second thing is we have some local not-for-profits that teach lessons that volunteer to help some economically disadvantaged kids get lessons. For example, the Noonan First Baptist Church actually has a whole entire school of music program in there where they bring in like legitimate private lessons teachers, and most of the kids that take lessons through that program are paying $20 or $30 a lesson, something like that. It's different per instructor, but then in addition, they'll pick up one or two kids that I can identify that need the help. There's another foundation out of like Making Music Foundation that kind of does the same thing. So we help in that regard. And then finally, the staff and I, the assistant director, Lainey Clanton, which by the way, I need to throw a little shout out that Lainey Clanton is absolutely amazing. I'm really not the band director at the high school. I'm more of the co-band director because she is awesome and I couldn't do it without her. But we teach kids on the side. But the final thing is I'll tell for people is most of your students probably can't take lessons if you help them get it at an affordable cost. So here's what we do. We have some students that can't afford $30 for, an hour. So what we do is we set up a system where someone can come in from the local university and that kid pays $10 for that lesson and they take lessons with two others at the same time. And we identify three kids that are on the same level. Like, don't put first chair in your top band with your sixth grader. That doesn't work. But you can get three kids that all pay $10, and now your instructor is still making $30. The kids were probably shy. Now they're working together, and they're working on a common task, and it's developing community. And so that's another thing is we send out our survey, and when the parent says, we can't afford lessons, I always ask the follow-up question, what could you do? Is that $10? Okay, guess what? I can get you going, $10. And so I would challenge people too to ask the follow-up questions. When they say no, find out what the no is. And we have about five or six kids that they really can't. But we identify those statistically. There are kids that are served, they're flagged in Infinite Campus as economically disadvantaged. And then our community has another program called Elevate, where those are the students that basically they send food home with on the weekends. Like, those are really, really disadvantaged students. And for those students, I will do what I have to for them to get lessons without them having to pay for anything, even if I teach every single one of them myself.
I mean, yeah, the one all by yourself, that's the Alfred Watkins way. I remember that.
Yep.
He did that at Murphy High School.
Something
when he first got there.
Let me tell you what we're getting ready to test this upcoming year, and I'm not speaking to the success of it yet. So my top musicians, my top band, are almost all taking lessons from someone. And shout out to a lot of the faculty at the University of West Georgia and Georgia State University, and several other people in the community. They've got just some great folks teaching lessons to my kids. But anyways, but I have a program at Noonan that we're rolling out next year. We call it Institute, and my kids actually can get awarded for this at the end of the year. So my first chair baritone, for example, takes lessons. Well, one day a week, he's going to go down to the middle school, and he's going to teach lessons at the middle school to middle school kids for $10 a lesson. And it's $10 for 20 minutes. Or to sixth graders, and they're going to do a studio where all the little sixth graders that play his instrument, we're going to pay $5 for an hour session. And so basically what he does is with the sixth graders, that one day a week, he goes in there and, he's going to say, hey guys, I'm going to play concert F. Will you play it back to me? Let's talk about embouchure. And he knows that his sole job in that 30 minutes or 20 minutes with those sixth graders is really to talk less and play more and have them play back. But what he's doing is he's getting sixth graders in the middle schools in the habit of taking lessons from the very, very beginning and in a way that they can afford it. And he's under the supervision of the middle school director. For the top seventh or eighth graders, he's teaching $10 lessons for 20 minutes. So this high school kid is making $30 an hour. And basically, the information he's learning from his professor, he is now giving that information to these middle school students. And so the information is passing. And it works great because what is he doing with this $30 that he's made from the hour, which is $10 for the 20-minute lessons? He uses that money to pay for his lesson with his professor. And it's this ecosystem of taking lessons. The middle schoolers are getting, it's secondhand, but only through one person, they're getting the value of applied instruction. The middle school directors like it because now their kids, they've got more kids getting one-on-one attention, and it's creating a sense of community. And it's also helping the high school students see the value of taking what you know and passing it on. And I don't know if that helps anyone, but we call it Newton Institute is the name that we gave to it. And some people call it peers teaching peers. But that's the new frontier for us is how can we, because our middle school students don't have boosters. So how can we take our hand-selected, they got to be kids that are hand-selected, students, and create a culture of lessons, but also I go back to how we started this show, create a culture of positivity and community. And so at the high school, every time we send these high school kids down, we're also going to send them with a sheet of, hey, these are the things the middle school director emailed us that they want you to cover. And also here are our 3 quotes for the day, which are just 3 inspiring things that they can say on their way out. Because at the end of the day, I go back to, we want to inspire kids. That's what we want to do. I want to inspire them to take lessons, but more so, I want to inspire them to be good people, which will make the music lessons valuable and worth doing.
I think that's going to be great. I hope that works out. That sounds awesome.
I will report back in a year and let you know. It could be epic fail or it could be epic awesome. I don't know yet. We'll see.
We'll have you back.
Absolutely.
We'll have you back on.
I feel like that could be implemented in so many different places, though.
Oh, yeah.
Like everywhere.
AJ, I know I've taken up a lot of questions, but I'm kind of out of questions, so it's your turn.
What you got, AJ?
Oh, man. I'm usually the resident marching band person, I feel like. I did 2 seasons of drum corps. I came from a very competitive marching band background down here in South Florida. And I'm just curious to see how your experience with Spirit and, your teaching and marching with them has affected your, competitive programs, both indoor and on the marching band field.
Absolutely. I mean, it affected everything. So what was interesting to me, so I marched Spirit from 2000 to 2004. It was one of the drum majors my last year, marched, obviously. Well, I'm old enough, guys, that I marched soprano bugle for a year before it got the trumpet. So, yeah, I just dated myself. But, what was interesting is when I went to March Spirit, we made finals a couple of the years I was there, and we played trumpet ensemble. We won I&E one of those years. It was a good time. But I was marching, just say it like it is, in a drum corps that was going to play somewhere between 15th and 10th every year. I mean, at no point was Spirit going to win DCI the years that I marched. But here's what I learned through that still influences me to this day. Every year and every day at Spirit of Atlanta that we woke up, we went outside and we went to practice with the intention of winning DCI. Like, it wasn't like let's go make finals or let's beat whoever. It's how do we beat Blue Devils? How do we win? How do we beat Cadets? Now some of that's kind of comical in a lot of ways, but it taught me that people who are trying to do something at a high level, they believe that they can be the best in the world, and they go out every day, regardless of what level they may or may not actually be at. They're going out to be the best at the world. I remember staying at a housing site with Pioneer, who none of the years I marched, I want to say Pioneer was like last in world class. We called it Div 1 at the time, or next to last or whatever. But
Yeah.
what was cool about those guys is it was the same mindset. I remember hearing their instructor because we were at the same housing site and we could hear kind of whatever was going on, and they had the same thing. It was like, all right, guys, this is how we get to the top, and this is the process that we're going to do it. And Pioneer from like 17th or 18th place was waking up every day, getting out of that gym and going out there to be the best in the world. And so how it affects me to this day with our marching band is, and our marching band is pretty competitive. I mean, we do great stuff. I would argue we're probably not, we're probably one of the most competitive in the state. Now, not, we're not making BOA finals or anything like that, but if you said the name of our school in our area, people would know. But we tell the kids this all the time. Like, our goal is not to be a placement. The goal is not to win. It's not to lose. Number one, it's to create a product that is remembered. And number two, it's every day we go outside, we are coming out here to be the best in the world. Not the best in Noonan, not the best in Georgia. We want to be the best in the world. So I set all of my kids down and we get on Flow Marching or whatever it's called now, and we watch Bands of America. And we finish the year, we'll watch BOA Grand Nats. We get our kids group tickets to go to the DCI Atlanta show. And then we come back and have conversations about, okay, guys, these ensembles are the best in the world. Now, how are we competitive? And we don't talk about it from a sake of what electronics they have and how they march. It's what skills, who are they as people that got them to this high level, and how can we emulate that? What discipline do they have? What philosophies do they have? How are they chasing excellence? Because at the end of the day, what marching band I think teaches all of us, and oh my gosh, I don't know if it's like this in Florida, but I've got some friends in Georgia that are just like, oh, marching band's not valuable. I'm like, are you kidding me? It is so incredibly valuable because it's hard and it's hot outside and it's all those things. But the value is creating people, an environment where these students understand that every day they wake up, the purpose of their life, come hell or high water, is to chase excellence. And excellence, whether you're in 17th place, you're barely making finals, or you're going to win DCI, whatever that is, excellence is always worth chasing. And don't chase the average, chase the top. Be Spirit of Atlanta, chasing Blue Devils from 17th place. Be Pioneer, chasing everybody from where they were, because that's what the best of the best do. And when you go attend those, I got a chance to go see a Bluecoats rehearsal when they were passing through. The great irony is when you get to the top, you're not chasing a person, you're chasing yourself. How can I be the best version of myself today? And that, oh my gosh, just I could go on and about this, but the marching arts, man, they're so important and they're so valuable to what we do. I love every second of it.
Yeah, I think that everything that you've said is just that's the intrinsic value to everything. The extrinsic stuff is always going to be there. You get to perform in front of the crowds, you get to wear the cool uniform, you get to just be kind of like a badass if you have that mindset when you march. But at the same time, the bands that are really doing the best things and consistently at the top, you can tell that there's an intrinsic mindset in almost every single kid, and of course the staff. And I really think that translates to everything else that you do. There's some places, my high school, it was very, at least when I went, it was the marching band was king. That was the thing that it revolved around. So I'm curious to hear how, with your competitive program, how do you balance everything else when it comes to concert season, when it comes to just preparing for marching band season? What's kind of like your process when it comes through just, going through those seasons?
Well, our philosophy is number one, as far as programs, we treat the concert program in a little bit more of an elevated type way. And that is that our philosophy is most of what we are doing starts here in the classroom. Because this is where we're giving students opportunities, both with the mastery system and the fundamental approach. This is where we dig in and we give you the skills and stuff to become a great musician. And everything else you do will be determined by how great of a musician that you are. I mean, most judging sheets, though not true in WGI wins, but in most places, music is 60% of the score. So that's part one. Now, having said that, anytime I spend $1 in Winter Guard, I spend that same $1 in percussion ensemble. I don't believe that I put ensembles outside of that in any order. My marching band is no more important than the Winter Guard, and the Winter Guard is no more important than concert percussion ensemble, because all of it is art. And that's what we spent a lot of time on this podcast talking about, is it's all about creating art. And so all the opportunities that we do are based on becoming an individual musician. And as a result of you being a master of your musician, what is the art that you can create? And art, Seth Godin writes all these books on marketing. And I read books, by the way, guys, that are nothing about band. And I love them because they challenge me to go, see the world differently. I mean, Seth Godin talks a lot about, he's talking about from a business mindset, but it's so true in band. How can we create something, a product, that is not about being the best? It's about creating something that's never been done, but is so valuable it's worth sharing, and that the person on the other side can appreciate it and see something that they've never seen before. And I know with marching band, like, we don't really focus on winning. Being competitive seems to happen as a byproduct of focusing in on creating something meaningful. And kind of off topic on that, just to throw it out there though, because at least this is my philosophy, but I think this applies to middle school too. And that is I also don't change how I teach between the four ensembles we have. Good tone is good tone. So I'm going to get preachy really quickly. So let's put this into something practical and not philosophical. I don't care who you are. I don't care where you're from. I don't care if you're in Texas, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, Wyoming, or one of my friends who teaches band in Alaska. Guys, the first thing that you have to do is teach your band to play with a good tone quality. You got to teach them to play with good tone before they take that first step. You got to teach them to play with good tone before you do anything else. And good tone is determined by embouchure, and it's determined by correct articulation, airflow, and hand position. And if they don't know that, then nothing else matters. On the flip side, you don't have to go do all the exercises that Carolina Crown does. I love the inside the circle packet. We have it, we use it, but my kids, to be successful, do not need to master all the stuff that's in there. But every kid, to be successful, has to play with good tone quality. So I'm going to get preachy on that and go, nobody cares how many crowds you play if you don't play them with a good sound. And like my old school mentor, someone once told me, nobody cares what music you play if you don't sound good when you play it. Tone quality, tone quality, tone quality. Spend 80% of your time on tone. Everything else will take care of itself.
Absolutely. Wholeheartedly agree. That the tone thing is so big. You got to have it. And it's funny, the bands that everyone loves, you just listen to their tone quality and you just know. As opposed to the bands that, everyone just kind of is waiting for them to kind of figure it out. The tone quality is all over the place, and of course that affects intonation, and then all the ideas and fun things you want to do with your show, it kind of goes down the drain if you don't have that one fundamental.
Yeah, I
agree about the tone.
I absolutely agree. And, and to relate it to the marching band, on the visual side of things, is spend 80% of your time on posture and a single step. And I think sometimes, especially with young directors, and this is something I've learned from marching drum corps, and I think it's true no matter which drum corps you march at, is spend most of your time on posture, body carriage, and that first technique, because that is the tone quality of movement. And you've got to have that basic skill. If your band is showing up and they're marching a figure 8 block on the very first day of band camp, or the very first time you have a practice, I question you as a teacher. I mean, that's just not normal. Most of the programs I know that are just slaying the game, they will focus on the most basic core of their visual technique, and they'll focus hours on it and perfect it. And then and only then do they put everything else together, because you can move at 160, but if your posture is bad, your tone's not going to be good. If your heel position's not hitting it right or striking in the correct way, depending on if you march East Coast or West Coast style, the how might be different, but the what has to be the same. And again, I go back to why does that matter? Because your tone quality won't be good. Everything relates to tone, but understand that the marching and the visual side is important. Why? Because it helps us to play with great tone.
Um, I mean, honestly, I feel like everything's been really, really solid. I think that, being a young director, I'm always questioning what should I be doing? Am I doing everything I need to be doing? You kind of touched on that earlier with, the hows and the whys of what we do. Just building community and that sense of nature that we can't lose sight of. But is there anything else that I think we asked a couple of our guests about, just young directors and if you have any advice for them, just a few, tricks and tips of the trade, especially for those of us that are, in the very early years of our career or just starting out or, in our first
like
year.
Three most important things.
Yeah.
Three most important things you think directors should be doing or thinking.
The very first thing that I think that every young director should do is number one, listen. And by listen, we already listen to people that have been in the game longer, but listen to good music. I spend an hour a day to this day, 17 years in, an hour of my day is dedicating to listening to well played orchestral music because when I stand on top of my podium, I need that for my band to always sound bad to me because my ear needs to constantly be comparing what I hear to that next level. So for me, Georgia, I love the Atlanta Symphony. We have tickets, we go. It's amazing. I'm also surrounded by great college programs. I love going to here, the University of West Georgia, Columbus State, Georgia State, UGA. There's so many great programs. So I would tell you if you're a young teacher and your first thing that you have to do is develop a great ear. And you will eventually get to the what of how to fix a problem. But if you don't hear the problem that it exists, you're not even going to know to go search for the information. So step one is develop your ear, and it's simple. You keep listening to your pop and rock music, but you need to listen to well played orchestral and wind band music. The second thing is you've got to get professionals in your room. Check your ego at the door, bring people in, and I would argue that the longer you teach, the more you will do that. Because at year 17, here's what I know. I know today that the music world is so big that I feel there are more things I don't know today than I realized there were a long time ago. Just this year, I've had 16 guests into my top band to come work with the kids. And when they work with the kids, I don't sit back there and go, well, I already told them that. I'm so glad you told them that. Now they'll do it. It's no, 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 no. Get in the room and I'm taking notes. And I'm not just taking notes on what they did. I'm taking notes on how they said it. One of my favorite things as an example of this is Dr. Ambrose from Georgia State University comes and works with my kids every year. And he's an amazing teacher. He's someone, him and Josh Bird at West Georgia, or Dr. Bird and Dr. Ambrose, both of them. I want to be just like him. But Dr. Ambrose, he came in, we were working this piece of music, and I remember he cuts them off, and he looks at them and says, guys, real music takes courage. You're playing great, but I need you to play courageously. The music that those students produced for the next 20 minutes when he said that phrase astounds me to this moment. And I wrote that down. Real music takes courage. Remind students to be courageous. And that's important because if you're not careful, first year teachers, what you'll do is you'll write down, he came in and worked on using more air to play lyrically. And that's important, and you should write that down too. But don't forget to write down the phrases, write down the moments of inspiration because you're going to have to reproduce it the next day. So that how is just as important as the what. And the final thing I will say is this, is don't get lost in the weeds. I think so many first year teachers, they go attend all these clinics, they write down everything. They've got a 45-minute connections period in middle school, and then they're so trying to cram in everything they heard at Midwest and Texas. Remember that those conferences and clinics are like buffets, and you need to, every day your kids should play long tones. Every day they should play a flexibility. Every day they should sing. Have your 4 key components and be consistent, but be careful you don't get lost in the weeds because if you do, you'll never progress. And the final thing I will say is this, is if you ever get into a spot where you're giving out great information, but the kids just aren't producing music at a high level. It might not be that your what is wrong. It might be that you need to stop, pause, and reflect on the how. Because how we get something to a student is sometimes more important than what. An example of that is my assistant band director, Lainey Clanton. This is her second year teaching, and I think she is just an amazing teacher. But this is the reason why. Lainey obviously is in her second year, so she doesn't know all the things that a great giant of our industry, Alfred Watkins, would know. How could she? She's only been teaching for 2 years. But there's a gift that Lainey has compared to other teachers who have been teaching only 2 years. Lainey connects with students on such an emotional level that maybe inside of her mind is only 20% of knowledge. But from her to that kid, she can get 80% of what she knows through inspiration into the mind of that kid. That is way more valuable than a second year teacher that knows 90% of all music because they went to the greatest college ever. But their people skills and their ability to inspire is so limited that they can only get 5% of what they know into that kid. So for the person listening to this podcast, if you're a first year or second teacher and you're frustrated because you feel intimidated because you didn't go to the prestigious college, you didn't get the greatest degree, you don't have a doctorate degree, maybe you just skimp by and you were a C student because C's get degrees. Just remember that what you can focus on through the books you read and the sessions you attend, focus on how to inspire students, because your gift may be not that you have all the content knowledge, but you can get 100% of what you do have into the mind of that student. That will make you valuable, and in the long run, you will inspire them to go so much further than someone who has all the knowledge but can't get a kid to be inspired to create.
Why don't you give a little plug to some of your side hustles?
Oh man,
Because I think our audience is going to be very surprised.
Yeah, remember I told you my stuff is all over the place. So the first thing I'll do a little shout out. My brother and I actually have our own podcast. It's not as cool as this one. This is a great podcast, but the pandemic and all happened, and it was coming up near the 2020 election cycle, and so. What was interesting is my brother, and I won't say who, what, or why, but we come from very different backgrounds. One of us lives on a homestead, has a farm. The other one of us lives in a city. One of us is a very, very conservative Republican. The other one of us is a more liberal Democrat. One of us attends a more conservative house of worship. One of us attends more of an independent house of worship. Anyways, we were talking and realized that we were very, very different, and we were just fervently disagreeing, but we kept coming back to the fact that when we were designing our best life, though it looked different, we wanted the same things. We wanted our kids to be happy. We wanted a great world. We wanted a safe world. And so our podcast is called A Brodacious Life, and it's a lifestyle design podcast. And the whole premise is that it's two dudes, my brother and I, who are very, very different, but we're out here trying to design our best life. And that if you're listening to the show, no matter what side of whatever spectrum you're on, we all want the same things. There's more that unites us than divides us. And we talk a lot about that. But if you're into setting goals and living your best life and overcoming all kinds of obstacles, both in life and business, then check out A Brodacious Life. You can find it on any podcast platform or at brodaciouslife.com. And let's see, we also have a YouTube channel for A Brodacious Life. And then the second thing that I'm highly involved in, and this is really, it's a side hustle, but I am a realtor. I actually have my real estate license in the state of Georgia, and I help people buy and sell their next great home in the state of Georgia. And as a part of that, I already said I'm a realtor with eXp Realty. So by the way, if you're in the great state of Georgia where I'm licensed and you want to buy or sell your house, I would love for you to email me at joshua.boyd@exprealty.com. And then my wife and I own a real estate investment company where we actually are renting. We have tenants, and we buy houses and invest in them, and we try to get the houses and we fix them up, get them ready, and provide high quality housing to tenants of all kinds of socioeconomic status across our city. It's kind of our way of giving back, and you can find information about that at jrbdreamproperties.com. And yeah, I'm actually talking to you today from inside of a house that we are actually flipping, and we put another house under contract yesterday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm
That's
recording
ultimate
this through a
plug.
cell phone and through a wireless mic that is attached up here. It's a Zoom PodTrack P4, and I'm on site.
Wow, that's awesome.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Josh, this has been an absolute pleasure, and this episode is going to just be full of gold for our listeners. Definitely going to be one I listen to over and over again. And I just want to let you know that I found a video on YouTube of Arya Cantabile and of Cry of the Last Unicorn. We're going to include it in this episode, which is probably going to be in 2 parts because we're at almost 2 hours now. But I just want to let you know that that's out there and that we're going to include it because, your stories were so powerful.
I love that too. And then I'll try to send you a link to I created a rap song back when I taught middle school called the Dynamics Rap. And we were talking
I
about
remember.
This. You remember that? Just connecting with students.
Oh, yes.
The link. I think it's still on YouTube, but
okay.
So all your listeners can like totally make fun of me. Now this is like 24-year-old Josh that made this video, but like it's all about students and having a great time. And man, I just appreciate you guys, and I'm honored that 2 directors of both of y'all's character and caliber would even include me on this show, because both of you are just doing great things. So, man, thanks for letting me ride your coattails today. This was great.
It was our pleasure. Thank you so much. And can't wait to have you back in Florida for the Pinellas County PD. So if anyone in Pinellas County is listening, July 11th, me, Kaylin, and Josh are going to be at your professional development for about 6 hours. And we had a meeting yesterday, and it's going to be awesome. Absolutely incredible. So hope to see you guys there.
Yeah, can't wait.
Josh, thanks again. Everyone listening, this has been the Florida Band Podcast. Take it easy, be well, and we'll see you on the next one.
See ya.